Virtually every piece of furniture that I make has many, many curves on it. And I've had to develop a method of cutting very, very close to those curved pencil lines. Using the side of the blade and just applying that ounce of pressure allows me to get very close to my pencil line so that I'm not spending a tremendous amount of time hand planing, hand scraping down to the actual shape I want. I'm already really close right off the bandsaw. When you're using the bandsaw, setup is incredibly important. The first thing you want to make sure is that the blade is tracking on the top of the crown of the upper wheel. The second detail is blade tension. It's really not necessary to over-tension the blade. For this cut, we're using a 1/2-inch blade, but I've only got the tension set for a 3/8 blade. Another important detail is actually to use a coarse blade, because the coarse blades have a large gullet which pulls the sawdust through the wood in a very efficient manner. Most people think if you're going to make a fine line, you use a fine blade. Well, that's actually detrimental. Sawdust in the kerf packs up, and the blade at that point wants to avoid the compacted sawdust, and you'll get a wobble to your line. You avoid it by using a coarse blade. The next important detail, of course, is the guides, and they should be set very, very close to the blade. You want to support the blade during the cut. If they're too far apart, the blade's going to wobble, and you'll end up with a wobbly line. This assembly is not only the upper blade guide, but it's also the blade guard. It should not be above the surface any more than perhaps 1/4 or at most 1/2 inch. You don't want it up high enough that you can get your fingers underneath the blade guide. So let's get cutting, and I'll share some tips as we go. To avoid the whole issue of choking up on the piece of wood, I'm going to recommend that you actually hold it much further back. The bandsaw blade has a wide curve. There's a tooth that goes left, a tooth that goes right. And if you attempt to sort of feed down the middle of that, that piece of wood is going to alternate back and forth, and that's what gives you the wobbly cut. What we'll be doing is just ever so slightly pulling the piece of wood in against the side of the blade, and that acts as our steady rest.